right, we have made it, and as the background music is way too loud, we're obviously going to put that one down. It is another time for No Timeout, and No Timeout is in this case, the worst name for it, because we have a definite timeout. We have one time where it's all done, it's all off, which is somewhat sad. But obviously, I got a man you were one of the first ones I subscribed on YouTube, Valorant related, because your videos were always so purely data driven, which can be very boring, I guess, to a good bunch of people. At the same time, it's a great basis. And this leads me to the point, how many gigabytes of Valorant-related data is on your hard drive by now?
Oh, I haven't checked in a long time, and I'm not sure I want to know.
It's important.
We'll just put it this way, I crossed the, 100 gigabytes of raw data threshold, literally months ago at this point. Right. So, yeah, okay. We're out here.
Okay, that's something I always ask myself, because to quickly really go ahead, and before we do the introduction and all kind of stuff, before I forget it, I don't want to forget it. You were starting even back in June or something. I have to be honest, I was watching all the videos ever since you produced every single video, and to be very frank, it's my memory just not going along. But I'm quite sure it must have been ever since beta came out. And this is where I asked myself, because back in the day, let's really go back. There wasn't VLR around. There wasn't the spike, out. How did you collect actually data when we go back? First computing competitive T1 X NSG Invitational 1 year ago. How did you collect data back then?
It was literally manual. It was all manual at that point. I would have my 2 monitors. I would have 16 streams up, starting in the group stages, and I would literally manually pull the data from every single match myself. It was like a 16-hour a day process when there were tournaments going on.
Let me understand this. So obviously, I would need to rewatch the computing NSG one. To be frank, I will not do that right this second. But I remember very much every single time you were obviously going in agent compositions, and leading to win and loss. I'm not quite sure if back in the day you also tracked if it was a win-loss on which side. Okay.
From the beginning, I was doing pick rates and win rates by agent and by side and by map. Those were the 3 layers of detail.
And then and on top of that, at one point you came in and also, besides the fact that you have very well copy-paste kind of things where, okay, this agent has been played that many times. You at one point also introduced compositions, like the success of a specific number of agents and that kind of selection. Was it also from start on?
Yep.
But how?
I had that from the beginning.
Okay, so this is where we need to fully wrap around it again. Because this is when you talk about manually, right?
Yeah.
What was your approach to a game? Like you said, I don't know how much the specifically the T1 NSG was, if it was round of 64, 32, 16, if it had an open qualifier or not. But how did you get along and collect the data, the thinking process, the technical process in it? This is step 1, 2, and 3. How did that look like?
Well, I'm kind of fortunate in that my professional background is from I worked in business analytics and business optimization. I have a degree in finance. I worked for a private equity firm for a couple of years. During my time at that equity firm, one of the roles that I held was director of business optimization at one of the portfolio companies.
Okay, there we go.
So data, I just think in data structures. That's just who I am. So looking at Valorant, it was a matter of, I know what data I want to be able to drill down to. What sort of collection structures do I need to have in place for that to be able to happen? All right, have my T's crossed, my I's dotted, let's go ahead with it, sort of thing.
Oof. Okay, so to get that straight, to have it practical, how did you get through it? You simply manually had screenshots, and I guess you also had to be lucky that the scoreboard is going to be popped up at one point to see the agents actually who's playing what, or.
So it was back at that point, people were a lot less cutthroat with the competition. So you had player POV streams for literally every single event. And that was generally in addition to the standard broadcast or whatever. in instances where I couldn't hunt down like just literally live footage of the match, I would ask the players directly for their match history for data purposes. And there's a good portion of them that I just had to get that way. So
okay, I mean, so this is what got you started. And you know, the thing is, when looking at your YouTube, obviously the first video is about Valorant, but I'm quite sure Valorant hasn't been like your first experience in competitive, or not competitive, but in general in gaming. Like, this is something because you don't have a Wikipedia page, which obviously then raises the question where, no, that's not, like, don't get me wrong, you hardly can gain data in that sense, right? When you look at preparation and when you look at those things, I think the most things I found out about you when we actually talked, when Ender and I casted your team last round safe, where it was Viper back in the day when everybody hated it, you were the only one defending her. What is it you did before Valorant? Like, not on the professional level, obviously, we find that out now, but in a gaming sense.
Yeah, so funnily enough, those two are kind of intertwined. Back in 2009, I was a professional World of Warcraft arena player. So that was like my first big foray into competitive gaming.
Which game?
I've been a gamer my whole life, but it was in 2009. I was playing World of Warcraft arena, specifically like standard 3v3 stuff. I was playing Death Knight at the time, and like straight up got sponsored by a local organization, got paid by them to travel and compete, whole 9 yards. So that was like my first foray into competitive gaming. Did that for around a year and a half, transitioned to League at that point, and I was like a big League of Legends guy for 10 years. So, but
then this brings me to the point where, obviously, because this is something you can keep very secret, but that obviously raises a question: how old are you? Because, you know,
oh man, I'm an esports boomer. I'm 28. I'll be 29 in August.
Yeah, that sounds very esports boomer, but obviously that explains a lot. You know, that obviously explains a lot to some people, at least. You know, I feel I'm 24 right now, and you know, I already feel old when you take. You know, I'm too old to say sheesh. To be frank, I'm honest.
I don't even go. Oh, I don't go near that stuff.
No,
it just sounds ridiculous.
It does. It's one of the first things I could imagine to say, and therefore I didn't think of that. But that's funny because, you know, this is so far away from actually first person shooting, right? Initially going back in that. But then obviously you could have also said to yourself, you know, why don't you stick to CS, you know, or why don't you stick to, I don't know, any other. Okay, there aren't many other first-person shooters, but what got you hooked with that? Because obviously it got you hooked so much that you started collecting data for 16 hours every day.
So, really the way it worked is I went from World of Warcraft to League of Legends to basically no gaming at all when I was finishing my degree, to working in private equity where I had no time for gaming. I was working straight 90, 100-hour weeks every week. And then when I left finance, I started working as a collegiate esports program head coach. So I've been coordinating and direct.
Sorry, just to make
all
sure.
Games. That's the thing. So like we have a Call of Duty team, a Fortnite team, a Magic the Gathering Arena team, an Overwatch team, League of Legends, like you name it, we probably have it, sort of thing. I think it's basically if we have the student interest to field a team in a title that there is competition for, we will do it. Okay. So that has given me a very diversified perspective on games, and I think that that's what allowed me to pivot into Valorant as well as I did, despite the fact I didn't really have the kind of FPS in general, let alone TAC FPS background that most people had coming into this. I mean, it's funny, I joke with my players on VIRTUOSO. If you go into my Steam account, I have 56 hours played on CSGO in my entire life.
Jeez, man. Like, I mean, I can't relate. Okay.
Yeah. So I really have never been much of a shooter guy, but because of my working collegiate, I've had to coach an Overwatch team for the last 2 years. I've had to coach a Rainbow Six Siege team for the last 2 years. I've had to coach a Call of Duty team for the last year and a half.
If you don't play it, how do you coach someone? This is obviously raising the question. How do you coach someone when you are I'm very mature. You don't need to be a professional to coach someone at something.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? Because those are really different games with different metas. So on, how did you cope with that?
So, first off, a ton of research. Thankfully, I'm a big data guy, which allows me to churn through information a lot faster than most people can. Not only that, but the way that I think is very logical at baseline. One of my claims to fame is that I'm an internationally published system dynamicist, so complex systems simulation. So I just think in that mode.
Okay.
If something is like systematic in any way, shape, or form, I can drill down to the core elements of it that are sort of keen for optimization very easily and leverage those to make something better. It's just the way that I've always been. I get it from my dad, who's worked in silicon wafer fabrication. He's been working in like the microprocessor industry for 30 years, and I apparently have all of his genetics because he and I are birds of a feather in that one. And I think it pivots very well into all of these very distinct multiple titles in esports, where I can go from Call of Duty to Overwatch to Rainbow Six Siege, see the commonalities in the way that their systems work from a competitive perspective, and really dig down to how to make teams better still.
Okay, this is where obviously there's so many interesting things about. We're jumping a lot around. A thing that I think, going back to the more trivial things in life, I think that I was recently, who was I texting? I was texting someone on Twitter, and I forgot her name because she is a North American Valorant caster. Mimi, Evil Cat, I think she's called. And I was asking her specifically because her last name sounded somewhat German, and obviously you can't be Schelasin, which obviously the SCH. It must be something German.
It's a dead giveaway.
It must be something German or Netherlands.
Yeah, my dad is a first-generation German immigrant. He's on a green card. He's not even a naturalized U.S. citizen. So.
Okay. I mean, okay, that's interesting. So I imagine came back in like 60s or something to the U.S. or something like yeah. Okay.
When he was just entering college age is when he moved over to the States. So
right. Okay. That obviously raised the question, do you speak German? But I mean,
I wish. I desperately wish that I did, but no such luck.
Did you learn any second languages? Because I don't know how much. I know that everybody's making fun of the US and the Brits obviously here in Europe not having a second language. Did you have the luck of that?
So it's funny. My dad is first generation German and my mom is first generation Canadian. And she's French Canadian. I also took a bunch of French growing up in school, so I would need to brush up on it, but I could very easily get to conversational level French. It would not take me long at all.
That's one thing which I adore so much about this is the only thing that that is so amazing about Canada to some degree, that they still have this room then, because when the first thing about why in God's name is there French in it, but it's still something that makes it so special. This is why one of the reasons why I like Canada, because I don't speak French first of all, but it is something that makes it unique in that sense. But this is something I find so unfortunate, and we go once we're in totally different topics, but obviously the most crucial thing with the few minutes we had talking so far, you were talking about doing 90 and 100 hours in private equity, which is probably something which, I think American wage levels are somewhat different due to the fact that your social system is, for example, different to the one in Germany. But 91 hours, I guess it is a decent salary. And then you go and teach kids some esports or some video gaming. How is that difference in lifestyle for you? Because 90 and 100 hours, I imagine it's something you can't do 40, 50 years in your life, obviously. What made you do that decision?
Well, so I would say going back all the way to it would be like grade 10 by EU standards. I had come to the conclusion that I wanted to start working in finance. And then I got out of school, got my undergraduate degree, started working in finance, and realized very quickly that I was damn good at it, but I had zero passion for it whatsoever. Like I enjoyed the processes involved. I was naturally very apt at them, but in terms of tangible reward and being able to see the fruits of my labor, there was literally nothing to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like just being a spreadsheet gremlin for 90 hours a week at minimum wasn't fulfilling at all.
I can
Not even
understand.
close.
Yeah.
And so it was after the 2 years that I was working for that firm, I was like, all right, I just have to get out here. As good as the pay is for someone my age, because I will be blunt, I was making ludicrous money for someone in my age bracket. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't worth just being really dispassionate about my work and grinding my way into a hole in the ground for something that I wasn't invested in for the long term. So.
And I guess specifically considering that are those years, when you are still capable of doing those things, or doing those things, but being young is something where you're still capable of learning something. You're still able to get yourself into new passion, because at one point the human falls into this pattern where, I guess it's life, which is a sad part. But the thing then is obviously. Do you personally you're coaching a team called VIRTUOSO, if I'm correct, if it's also pronounced right?
Correct,
yeah. You need to make sure, because it should be Italian originally, but I guess the way it is, it could be pronounced American. Do you personally believe that this ability of yours to think so strategically, or not strategically, pardon, more technically, I guess technically is a good term for it, is something that makes you stand out as an individual for teams, being there and having a great sense of analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that not having a traditional TAC FPS background, but still having a very objectivity-centric systems thinking approach makes me fairly unique in the scene. Mm-hmm. I feel like there are a lot of people who are naturally good at analyzing this game because they come from TAC FPS and they can draw parallels. I am very different in that I am coming to many of the same conclusions through a far more abstract way. Mm-hmm. I'm not relying on precedent or something I've seen before to be like, no, this is like that other time that I saw Astralis do this in CS. It's like, no. This is how the complex system of this game works. Ergo, this is how X, Y, and Z should happen. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of the bias out of the situation and lets me think out of the box a bit more than a lot of analysts, I think.
That's something that I asked myself, because, I generally don't know you well enough to say that there's a difference in having an understanding and having coaching abilities, because I think there are a lot of people who understand, but they are just not, having the human interaction kind of thing that makes others thrive and flourish. Do you personally see yourself in the future being something more like an analyst? Because this is obviously something where every bit of technical analysis, which is not meant in the stocks term, but obviously in the gaming terms, is something you would be absolutely the best, possibly best in? Or is it something, I don't want to be sitting on the sidelines just writing down numbers, I want to be sitting there also, or standing more likely on the stage behind the players?
So it's a little bit tricky because, straight up, I mean, this arrogant ego aside, I genuinely believe that I am currently one of the best, if not the best, analyst on earth for this game. I think that I offer a unique enough angle that if you partner me with someone who has a really strong fundamentals basis in TAC FPS, but also has an open mind where they're not just going to shoot down everything I say, that becomes the deadliest combo you can possibly imagine, which is why VIRTUOSO has been finding so much success recently. Is if you look at the dynamic of our team, it's me as the coach, and our IGL is an ex-CSGO coach for Envy, who comes from an incredibly good TAC FPS fundamentals background. You partner the two of us, and it is genuinely scary, the sort of stuff that we can come up with.
It's funny that you say that, because the last time I was here, I had obviously Emil, the coach of NIP, on it. What he said, because he had one of the most intense bonds with a sibling I could have ever seen. Like, those guys have studied together. They have studied the same. They have led to university at the same time. All of this. Which obviously brings me to the point, like, they together sound lethal, you know, in that sense. When they work together, that's something unique. What would you, you know, you're talking about someone who would be obviously where he throws the ball at you, you throw it back, you're having a constructive conversation. I think that's the best way to put it. Who would be something in your mind that, you know, is capable of doing so? Because the North American scene is much more stacked with talent than Europe, to be frank. When we, for example, think about how many prior CS pros are playing it.
I mean, it's a tricky thing. I haven't had enough one-on-one conversations with people, but I think that the hardest part of that equation is less the level of expertise. I mean, there's so many like super like effective and well backgrounded CS guys in NA that they're a dime and a dozen. I mean, you could throw a rock and hit 3 of them. Whether or not those people are open-minded, I think, is the harder part. Because I can think of a long list of really great CS players who have moved over to Valorant in NA that I'm pretty sure if I had a conversation with them, they would tell me to just go jump after I said 3 things, despite the fact that there's a lot of merit to them, because it doesn't mush well with their fundamentals understanding, and they're just too set in their ways to be able to adapt or consider something to the contrary.
That's obviously funny because, you know, every time I watch the video of yours, I remember you were always a little bit ahead of time. I'm not quite sure when it was, but I think it was between beta and release is when you said that Brimstone will become outdated and Owen will become the big thing, and it happened. I think we don't need to talk about how many months you were screaming Viper, and it finally happened. Though speaking of which, I think Viper has been receiving the wrong buffs, because I think this over buffing of her wall and the following temporary damage you get, that was just, it just seemed stupid. For me, that seemed to be one of those things where I ask myself, you just want to overpower her for the sake that people start using her.
So it was the right end effect through debatably the wrong methods. They were like, Riot was very correct in assessing that the issue with Viper as she existed prior to the buffs was that people wouldn't a huge part of Viper play. I mean, I'm gonna set the scene here. A huge part of playing Viper correctly is getting your opponents to respect the wall. You have to tell them that if you cross this wall while it is up, you will die, period. And pre-buffs, there was no actual rationale that a team would have to respect the Viper wall at baseline. You had to literally have them push that wall and kill them and mentally condition them to have that level of respect for it. What Riot did by adding instant decay to the wall was literally put a mechanic in the game that said, you literally have to respect this now. Yeah. You know for a fact that you're going to get hit with something brutal if you try to cross it. And so I think that they got the end effect that they needed. The way that they did it, though, was really aggressive. I mean, 50 instant decay was very, very distinctly over the top. Even 30 decay now, like, I'm not going to say that it should be dialed back more, because I think that it's in a fairly healthy state right now, but I think as an agent overall, Viper is still quite a bit more powerful than she probably should be, because there were teams already before these buffs at all happened that were finding extremely high levels of success with her. I mean, you had Fnatic over in Europe playing her on Bind, you had us here in NA, which, I mean, our accomplishments here are in no way comparable to the stuff that Fnatic was pulling off, but within tier 2, we were consistently finding significant levels of success, and we were running unbuffed Viper, so to think that she needed these huge magnitudes of change, I think, is a little bit overly ambitious, but if for no other reason than to finally get her into the agent pick rotation, I think it was a good decision at the end of the day.
That's something... Because that agent was always... I think what intimidated teams, and this is one of the downsides for me about Valorant, is the rest cycles are short. Way too short. Absolutely too short. Because right now, you know, this is why I think NIP and FPX genuinely lost. is because they didn't have a proper fundament, because they couldn't properly practice, and that brings them to a point where they maybe not necessarily burned out, but they're lacking creativity due to not having a space of practice. And this is where I think a lot of players were initially intimidated. And it gives me to this comparison. I don't know how much you know about in CS, but there was obviously the SG553, which nobody bought, which was one of those rifles that nobody bought. And at one point, it got just basically this here 25% off coupon code, and everybody's buying it and figuring out, oh, this is a great weapon. This was working fine. And it's a bit like the same with Viper, but going away from her, a thing which I haven't heard too much your opinion on yet, and specifically not too much, is Astra. As I'm an Astra main, I genuinely love this agent to death, but I think she's absolutely overpowered. I think she is at a state where you as an Astra player are capable of setting back the spawn boundaries, for example, and this is something it shouldn't be capable of doing.
He's definitely a little over the top right now. I've discussed it a couple times as to how I think she could be nerfed in a way that wouldn't just completely gut her, but I think it's really tricky. You've watched enough of my content. I assume that you remember this, but in one of my mastering macros, I talk about style dynamics and the triangle that comes from TCGs and CCGs, where it's you've got aggro in one corner, mid range in another, and control in the other, and there's a triangular dynamic between the three in terms of them balancing each other out and creating a healthy meta ecosystem. I think that Astra being introduced to the game was actually the catalyst that allowed a proper version of control to exist in this game at baseline. I think that after the Sentinel nerfs, where they like soft gutted Cypher and Killjoy quite a ways back, they basically deleted the control corner of the triangle, and Astra being reintroduced to the game is the thing that brought that back to life. Which is why I'm a little bit hesitant to say, oh yes, Astra's overpowered, they definitely need to nerf her, because if they then end up being too heavy-handed with that, you end up in like a single lateral metagame ecosystem where we've got an effective aggro configuration, an effective mid-range configuration, and nothing to counterbalance the cycle.
This is where I genuinely believe, like, slightly just upping the return of the stars, for example, is something that would work, if you ask me, because at this point in time, it feels like the kind of bait you can play and the kind of fake you can play with her is just way too OP in that sense. And that makes this agent just so crazy to me. The matter of fact, what you can all do, or if you could imagine that, I don't know, this little dissipate smoke they have initiated, where just for 1 second, if they start removing that, I think I would be happy with that as well, because it's one free, oh, I can pass back smoke where you don't need to use the actual utility. Still, it's something where I'm looking very much forward to how it's going to be played on Iceland, because how much are you in the scrim rumors or scrim bucks in NA?
Oh, I'm knee deep in the NA scrim bucks, okay, in terms of the rumor mills that I'm a part of.
Because I asked a lot of players or people in the scene, like, who they think they'll win, and I think the entire time, I got the opinion it has to be Europe winning. Also, when a lot of European teams start to scrim against all those others that are right now on the island, do you genuinely believe that is the thing? Do you genuinely believe that it is something where where Europe is mostly quiet, not talking too much, just sticking it to the server, and they'll take it home, or will this very cheering USA crowds actually figure it?
I think that. I mean, again, I'm like a big data analysis guy.
I watched the video already.
I think that if you think EU isn't going to win Iceland, I think that you're biased. Like,
it's Japan.
Yeah, like I think that if you are being remotely objective, you think that the only three teams that have a significant shot at winning Iceland are TL, Fnatic, and Sentinels. And I think that if you look at that off of pure mathematics, 2 of them are European
Yeah.
and 1 of them are North American. You do the math. Like
the only thing that I'm so worried about there is obviously which can't be seen or which can't be understood at a statistical level is that we'd never had LANs. So obviously this factor, how we played online, how we played offline, which you can do a lot in other esports in the past, you can't do that now. So this is where I'm worried, because from an experience point of view, that is the only thing Europe is lacking to some degree. I mean, for example, Liquid has players which played obviously in British CSGO, and they played, the British National Championship offline. That's nice and great. Scream obviously played on the big stages. Yumpy to some degree, not as long as the others. And with Fnatic, just not the case. Those players are so far away from having that veteran experience of a Scream or someone like we're talking about a Shazam, how many million years he has been in CS. This is where I really start to worry for Europe, because this is something where I think that cocky North America are capable of snatching it. That's the only worry I have.
Yeah. I mean, to sort of qualify that, though, is at that point, you're talking about Europe throwing due to lack of experience, not North America winning off of their own merits. And I think that that's an important...
It's still winning.
An important subtext to that.
I get that.
That people aren't appreciating.
Yeah.
Is for North America to win, you need EU to choke. And like people haven't actually let that settle in yet. Like, because that seems to be a recurring narrative, and there's definitely merit to it. You have a situation where like Fnatic has never played LANs to the best of my knowledge. Like, those are all very green players. But you're talking about a situation where Fnatic plays to their highest potential. They're still winning it. Hell, like if they don't actively choke due to their lack of experience on LAN, they just walk with first place. Sweet, great, awesome. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're saying, yes, my region's hope is that the other region falls flat on their face.
It's true, and it specifically is getting interesting to me because one thing when I'm watching your most recent videos, and I'm obviously biased and obviously delusional to some degree, because I was thinking Europe has the highest Astra pick rate. They must have played Astra the most. I was absolutely wrong. I was horribly wrong. Which then leads me again to the thought: is that something that that's gonna change? Because, for example, in Haven, for example, we saw Liquid change things up. Yumpy was suddenly playing Killjoy for some reason. I'm just very excited to see what kind of magic and what kind of rabbit out of the hat moments we will have with Iceland. It's coming in soon. It's starting, I think, in 2 days. It's starting in 2 days. And the only interest I really have is which of the other regions will get the 4th slot. This is the only thing that I'm really excited for, because I hear that I heard, for example, from Gambit, nobody is actually any competition to European teams. Fine, let that be. Will, for example, version 1 actually get the 4th place? Or will it be... So a lot of people, for example, rate the South American teams very high, both Brazil and LATAM.
Yeah.
Though they seem somewhat off meta, I genuinely have to say.
Yeah, so my assumption there is that Vikings is a pretty comfortable 4th place. I think that if version 1 was playing with their full roster, they just coast to 4th place. I don't think that anyone really challenges them. I think the fact that they're not playing with Whippy, who, if you go back and you watch version 1's miracle run to get to Iceland in the first place, if you can watch that run and tell me that Whippy wasn't debatably the single most important player in that run, then you should go rewatch it and try to answer that question again, because I think you're wrong. Like, he is a player, may have just been the single most impactful person on that team throughout that tournament. It wasn't always in terms of just being like the raw frag monster, but in a meta where Viper is overpowered, like, let's just say it how it is. In a meta where Viper is overpowered, effective use of Viper utility is a significantly overinflated value, and I have little to no confidence that someone is going to be able to walk onto that roster as a fill and have the same level of efficacy. I just don't think that's a realistic expectation.
that's one of the first things that this ain't happening. But you know, the only sad thing of this for me still is that we don't get those internet, because I'm disconnected from North America. I'll be honest with you, I'm disconnected from North America absolutely. I genuinely don't care about North American Valorant, and not because I'm disrespectful.
Savage.
Yeah, no, but I don't, you know, it's totally, I mean, I watch it to be obviously up to date, but it's not like I'm so eager to see it, because it always, whenever I watched North American Valorant, it seems like somebody took the default switch off, you know, in the sense of actually playing defaults, for example. This is something that bothered me. This is why I loved NIP, for the matter of fact that they said, you know, screw that dual list. We don't need that. We just play purely on defaults. I just love it. This is where I'm so thankful that you have star IGLs, at least 2, well, 3, in Europe, in the form of Angel and Existence, and maybe one big shows up, maybe GOP, but I don't know. That's the only thing that I was always so worried about, because it seemed like, and I don't know what it is, and you can explain it better to me. Why do you think it always seems like NA is way more reckless than EU, for example? What is it with the players that it always seems just way more reckless?
So, I think, who was it? Tens tweeted out yesterday that if you look at like ranked proficiency and solo queue abilities, NA is way better than EU, because they know how to like eke out BO1 victories in uncoordinated environments. And a lot of that stems from North American players are very good at finding timings that shouldn't exist and taking EU tools and finding success with them. EU is way too disciplined to do that nonsense. And so you go into a coordinated ecosystem, and suddenly a lot of those characteristics that make NA these like solo queue demigods just start being awful for them. And I think that translates a lot into pro play, where you don't see NA defaulting as much, because A, defaulting requires a ton of discipline, a ton of practice to do properly, and B, why would they do that when they know that they have confidence in this like very egotistical sort of fishing method of playing, where they rely off of just trying to find timings and really strong mechanical base?
Yeah, but I mean, that must be something at one point that must be an absolute difference. I mean, you know, we can talk about solo queue the entire day, but it still should be like at one point an awareness of players from every region that this is not like matchmaking, you know what I mean? And I mean, you know, no, but that's the thing, right? You can play you can play as many pucks.
I'm not
as you
disagreeing
want.
with you.
I know you don't. But I mean, you play as many pucks as you want. At one point, you realize, hold on, this is a proper 5v5 with coordination and discipline, and this is our default, and this is our set piece. How can that legitimately be a thing?
I mean, I think that NA has just done it for so long, and it's such an ingrained part of the regional play style that it's sort of a snowball effect, where it has been such an integral part of the region for so long that it would take someone moving away from it permanently and just being unilaterally better for a prolonged period of time for them to finally evolve past it. Yeah, and that just hasn't existed right now.
That should be then 100 Thieves. I mean,
in theory, but has 100 Thieves actually done that?
That's the next thing. That's probably then the worst, considering that they didn't. Because, I mean, this team is by far, I think, the most experienced team in Valorant. The team with the most experience throughout every single player in Valorant in the entire world. When you get star IGLs like Nitro, obviously brilliant people who had a comeback story like Steel. When you get those individuals, years and years and years of experience, and they don't make it. Like, this is a thing where when they were formed, and you know they added even when February, January, March, something like that.
Early this year,
right? And I was like, that's done. Like, what does North America want to do? How much more can you form a team that is consisting of stars, and they still fail? And
also, we're gonna come full circle a little bit. I was talking earlier how one of the things that I think is most valuable about my perspective is that if you put me with people that have really strong TAC FPS backgrounds who are also open-minded, that's where I'm most dangerous. I think 100 Thieves is in desperate need of someone like me because they have a enormous depth of TAC FPS fundamentals background, but it's a goddamn echo chamber. Who in there is actually going to bring a diversified perspective that isn't entrenched in CS:GO history?
Yeah. I remember one of your first videos was stop playing CS and Valorant.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's not to say that they're just pure CS heads.
Obviously.
There's very clearly certain things that they do that are innovative and are great, but is it enough for them to be in what my definition would be a true Valorant team right now? No, I think they rely too much on their fundamentals, and that if you look at the way that they're using utility and the way that they're forming compositions compared to a lot of their composition, they're behind the curve. If they were at the same level as other teams when it came to compositional development, utils, setxx, etc., with the level of fundamentals they had, no question they'd be the best team in the region, but they're just not right now.
Because about that default thing which you mentioned, or lacking the discipline. I remember very much when I talked to Emil, again, when it was Fabriken, when it was called Fabriken, and they played with Shadow and Meadow, and I was watching a game, no idea which tournament, it was in July last year, so nearly 1 year ago, and they played this ridiculously basic, really basic, I mean, it's like a child drawing it, this ridiculously basic default, but highly effective, taking all the control over on bind, and you were like, how much more textbook can Valorant be? And it's unfortunate to see that in the end of the day, that something like that is lacking from region to region. But getting away from that, I mean, it's the thing is, as we only have an hour, Valorant is obviously something where people can watch 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours on your YouTube channel. You mentioned you have a German father, which obviously makes it interesting due to the fact is that for some reason you're driving a Subaru, which is then odd. Which I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't know what he drives, but how come? How is it? I mean, a BRZ is cool, but how come is it that?
I will put it this way: predominantly budget reasons.
Okay.
I have if you look at the money I have into that BRZ and how fast it is compared to what I would have to put into getting a Cayman, you can't even compare the two. I'll pull car lengths on a base model Cayman in my BRZ, and I have almost 20 grand less into it than I would have to get a Cayman.
How much BHP is that thing on?
320.
Okay. So yeah. it's wonderful to see because I think there are not too many petrol people in the esports universe.
Yeah.
Though you need to see. I'm from Stuttgart, which obviously denying Porsches make it impossible. I mean, I grew up in such a family.
Porsche's in my blood. As soon as I can realistically afford one, I will own one. Don't you worry.
Same.
My best buddy here in the New England car scene, he originally had a BRZ like me, and he recently got a really great gig in IT, and he upgraded to a 911 turbo that is heavily upgraded and has 800 wheel horsepower.
Yeah, you don't.
The thing is basically a jet. I don't know how you even drive that.
But you don't need that, especially in the States. You don't need that.
That is way too much power. I will pass on that one. Thank you very much.
The funny thing is, which is always said so funny to think about, is as your father, have you ever been to Germany? As your father's German, I guess so.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And has he ever taken you to the Autobahn, for example?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Good. Because that's the only thing which is. It's so odd because it's not reasonable, and I think it has to be mandatory in every country. It's Germany being weird. I think I always try to compare Germany.
I think you mean fantastic, not weird.
yeah, but I always try to compare it in the sense that the Americans got a weapon, the Americans got still their guns, and we still got the Autobahn. So it's still something very irrational.
Can we trade? Is that on the table?
No, absolutely not. I don't need that.
Damn. I'm so close.
I'm happy to have I think a maximum of 1-digit police deaths in Germany. A year, not a day, to point that out. So I'm very happy about that, but it's something which I never understood why do people even buy expensive cars outside a country where, you take it on a track. So I understand that. I fully understand that. That's something absolutely reasonable. But other than that, I'm always like, you could do so much more with it. You can't even use it properly.
Yeah. It's sad. I mean, I try and do at least 2 track days a year, and I'm lucky that I live in a part of the country that is like very mountainous. There's lots of like fun curvy roads around that you don't necessarily have to be going crazy fast to be able to enjoy. But yeah, if I lived in Germany with this car, I would be having a lot more fun with it. I'll put it that way.
I can imagine. I recently had the same, but it was not. So now I live in Austria, so I don't enjoy the Autobahn that much anymore. But I recently took a vacation in Croatia, and it got crazy to that point that when you take a look at the country roads, I was never finding any speed traps, and nobody was around. And yeah, I drive a BMW F22 M235i with like 380 horsepower or something, and it's just something so crazy. It's so irrational. I think it's just in the human irrational that it's so fun, and it's so, you always take yourself at risk. Not only you hurt the environment and you waste a lot of money, and take others at risk and take yourself at risk. It's still something that, first of all, I think our generation will absolutely miss. It will. I don't know many people, like back in the day a lot more, but nowadays it just became absolutely, like, I don't know how many friends you have who still own a car on their own and actually think it's valuable.
I mean, a lot, but that's only because I'm like part of the car scene.
Okay, right.
It's cheating.
Yeah. I get that. No, but it's when you look at, like, I don't know how if it's specifically Americans, but also in Germany, it's just not happening anymore, which is, I don't know if you can call it sad, because fuck, it ruins this world to some degree. Sucks. It's you have to put it that way. But it's at least nice to see. But it's actually, I think tracks are something very, tracks like racetracks are something that are just spread around the US very often. Like when I watch YouTube and I watch a few car YouTubers, there's a lot of random racetracks that exist in the States, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where like you live and you grew up, what your perspective of like scale is. Like there are some people who think that like an hour drive is a really long way to go for something, but if I drive, if I drive 3 hours, I could go to 4 different like really nice racetracks.
4. Okay. Because overall, for example, in Germany, there are only 10. There are officially only 10 racetracks, which is crazy to me to think of. When you think about how it is in the States. But, the thing that always confused me the most, or like confusing, it sounds like so much on a high horse, but when you're just having how is it called? Hold on, I have to take a look, because when you just simply drive the same speed the entire time and you can't change anything, you have to stick to the same speed. What is it called? This goddamn thing you have? Cruise control, obviously cruise control.
Oh yeah.
It's so odd. It's so odd to think of that, but. Because specifically, even when you think of Germany and people like drive 300, not often, but 250 kilometers an hour, and like, how often do people get killed? I mean, sure, people get killed due to that, but the people go to the right-hand side. And when you look at all the other states around, nobody fucking cares where they drive. And especially in the States, it's not even a rule to stay on the right-hand side, is it?
It is in certain parts of the country. Like a law just got enacted in the region that I live in, where it's now like you can get a ticket if you're not moving over. Doesn't stop people. They still don't do it ever. But
okay.
Technically, it's against the law now. Crazy.
Because I was thinking about that and was just absurd. But going back to that, talking about what you would buy if you would obviously have the additional money. What would it be if you could like choose from the entire selection of vehicles?
Oh, like world? My Grail car?
Exactly.
So my like ultimate dream car. This is like completely unattainable in every way, shape, and form. Just never gonna happen. It's actually the car that aesthetically my car is designed after. It's the Gambala Mirage GT. It's a heavily modified Carrera GT.
Yeah, of course.
The one that I was like specifically in love with was actually owned by Ben Chen in New York City, and he destroyed
That's that one?
there.
Okay, yeah.
It made headlines. Yeah,
I know it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got to see it once in person at a car show down in Connecticut, and then like a year later is when he destroyed it. I was so sad because that is literally my favorite car of all time right there.
Understand. I mean, it's cool to the fact that it was the last 10-cylinder that Porsche has ever produced, which is making obviously. It's going away.
It's a screaming metal death trap.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a beautiful one.
It's understandable. This is the thing, which obviously is non-existent. I mean, everything above 8 cylinders nowadays is crazy to think of. Yeah. I don't know what is a normal car over. Maybe a BMW 750 or 760 has 10 cylinders. I genuinely don't know, but is there anything retro? Are you like in any retro cars? Is it because the Jabal is a very modern and not like a stock kind of thing?
I mean, if I was gonna go for any like retro vintagey type cars, it would be an air-cooled, like an older air-cooled 911.
Yeah,
probably.
That's the right answer. It's absolutely
it's
absolutely the right. Especially for me, it is because talking about that season, it is a 993 in Arena Red. The 993 Turbo in Arena Red, because that's the only one that is standing timeless. That's always going to be timeless. You can look at the car and be like, was it made last year? Was it made 20, 50, 60 years ago? You'll never get it. The only thing that's coming close is the BMW E31 850 CSI. But you wanted to say something about that. Sorry.
There's someone who literally lives in my town who has one of those.
Yeah, that's
like a 993 Turbo in red with like the old rubber air dam at the back, the whole 9 yards. It is spectacular.
I mean, the only thing that comes close to it, and that's something that's somewhat rare, is the, I don't know if you know it, obviously, is the 850 CSI, BMW E31 850 CSI, because it was still a 12-cylinder. It was a V12 back in 94 or something, which is crazy to think of, that people still, that there were cars, regular cars, sort to say, that have 12 cylinders. Not imaginable nowadays. Nowadays, obviously. But getting away from that, so it's obviously something I had to ask, because I was looking stuff up and I saw that there's a specific dedicated car page, and
I'm a car guy.
Understandably, I think is there an English saying of what like a horse girl is? I don't know, because that's something in German that exists.
Yeah.
So this generic gender stereotypical kind of hobby, because it's always the counterpart. It's always the worst. I always feel weird when talking about cars, because it's exciting and nice and great. It's always like it's at the same time this just absolute counterpart and stereotypical kind of thing. Either way, getting away from that, we obviously have to stick to something which seems more appropriate. Not necessarily like Valorant, but I know every time I talk about cars, everybody just stops tuning off. If this is gonna land on YouTube, which it will, I will definitely make it a skip button on top of it. A thing that I always like to ask is obviously if that, you have the opportunity for 24 hours to meet anyone you like, legitimately.
Oh man,
anyone from the past, existing right now, and we have to consider that those people can also be dickheads. Like, shut the fuck up, I don't care about what you're saying. So obviously this can be something those people can also do. So who would you probably choose in that circumstance, in that scenario? That's a tricky one.
Yeah, that is a tricky one. That is a very tricky one, actually. It's kind of a cop-out answer, but probably my grandfather on my mom's side.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away 4 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, he lived in Western Canada, and I lived in Northeast United States. So he was always super far away, and we were like never particularly in regular contact with them. And he had, from like, the stories I've heard about him since he's passed are just ridiculous, and I would love to hear them from his own mouth, just more of his history, because I feel like that's something I genuinely missed out on. Crazy.
That's tough. I unfortunately just don't have that. I always have to go for popular or like popular.
Yeah, I'm like, there's a billion famous people I could pick from, but like, I mean, there's just some wild funny stuff, because growing up, so my mom and her parents lived in Ottawa, and he was working as a security guard in the French consulate there.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, after like a big meeting with ambassadors and whatnot, they hadn't cleared the tables. And I probably shouldn't say this because it's got to be incriminating on some level, but he yoinked the official parchment of the French Prime Minister. So we just have that chilling in our attic somewhere, you know?
No
it's
way.
Like the official like state letterhead of the French PM is just like hanging out
casually somewhere in Canada
in a box. Yeah, it's fine.
That's crazy.
So there's just like wild stuff like that. So
that's something. I unfortunately can never recall such stories. That's the saddest part. I don't know why, but it's always nice to hear, because also last episode, for example, was also the same with the grandfather side, which is obviously, I think if people choose something personal, it's always a little better than, I mean, specifically if people choose living persons, I never understand, because this is where you get the most media value out of them. But anyway, getting away from that. Obviously, what would be the most interesting to me also is coming from a Valorant side of things away, is how do you say that? Like, do you personally believe in a concept of talent? Do you believe, because I had this conversation last time already, and I think it's always worth asking, do you think that the concept of talent is something that actually exists, or it's all a big hoax which is based on something different?
There's definitely a such thing as talent. I think that the way people... I think that talent genuinely exists. I think that people often mislabel other things as talent, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of the time, talent is born out of like a history in similar areas, and thus it like comes off as a natural aptitude or whatever, but in reality it's just the fruits of labor done years prior. It's some people will look at talent and just be like, oh yes, that person had to put no work whatsoever, they're just naturally insane for whatever reason. And I just talent in that respect, BS, doesn't exist. That is just fallacious at a baseline.
Sure.
I think that it's always born out of effort done in the past at one point or another.
That's actually something, I think, because I put it that way. I think talent is a mixture of random causes that got together. So
exactly, yeah.
Because it's that causal chain of, for example, having parents that teach you very important social values, and then you understand the fundamentals of team sport, and randomly your friend shows you, hey, there is this video game, and then you get good at it. I think this is something where this is why I think it doesn't exist. I mean, if it's the overarching term, fine, I'm okay with that. But I genuinely think it's all random. It's all luck, and it's purely luck. I think it's purely based on luck. Because you get the best, because you have to put in the work, right? Fully agree. I'm fully on the side. But I think the circumstances how to work, that is still based on luck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at everything you have sunk personal effort to, like if you look at everything across your personal history and each thing that you've put effort into is like a star, you need those stars to align when you meet something new for that to be translated as talent. And there's always going to be luck involved in that process. I mean, like I was a sprint swimmer growing up, so I had a lot of short twitch muscle fibers, which gave me good reaction times. I was also part of a team because of that. I also played World of Warcraft competitively, so I had a natural aptitude for complex systems. That has made me quote unquote talented at video games throughout the rest of my life. And that none of that's talent. Like there was effort involved in getting good at World of Warcraft and understanding those systems. There was effort involved in being a swimmer that created a certain type of body type that lent itself better towards having good reaction times. But for those to come and culminate in a way that was actually meaningful and translated to talent was all luck. So
that's the thing.
I totally agree.
I guess you also got lucky that your parents introduced you to sprint swimming, and not like to football or soccer or something different. I guess that's also something that, because you still put the time in, but then others made the decision. Especially as a child, you can't actively make the decision. The worst part of all of this is that this 1 hour is over, which usually in No Timeout there's no timeout, so this should continue. But circumstances of modern capitalism forces me to work, and that's basically it. I'm happy to have work. Don't get me wrong, but right, Anderzz. I think at that point in time, usually the other one ends the episode, but I have to, unfortunately. So thank you very much for your time. I think we have to continue this once in a while due to the fact that we didn't talk enough about Valorant. But
part 2.
Yeah, that is just one timeout. This is going to be the episode called One Timeout. But well, I will end this at this point. Thank you very much for your attention, and I see you guys for another episode of actually having a timeout.